Sorry, it's not wanting to cooperate with me this morning. Give me just 1 second. I think it's because I have two presentations open because I was trying to prepare for the other one when Laura gets on. Good morning. Give me just 1 second. I promise I am not this inept when it comes to Zoom. I've done this enough, but apparently I am struggling right now. Give me just a second.
No worries.
Okay, there we go.
So Annie, you might want to, oh, there you go. Gotcha.
Okay, sorry. This is a challenge when you have two screens. I try to be very multitasking. Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Annie Koo Thornquist. I am happy to be here. Before I begin and do an introduction, I would like you to toss into chat just answer the following question. Just come up with a number. So it's at what point, so like how many numbers of employees, right? Should an organization have an established formal compensation program? So I'm just curious what you think. How many numbers of employees do you need to have before you actually should have a formal compensation program? It's not a test. I'm not going to take anybody's name down. I'm just curious to see what you think.
So we've got some answers.
All sorts of numbers. All sorts of numbers. All right. So the sentiment is about right for most people. It's when you start your organization, when you have that one employee and you're going to end up paying them. If you start an organization and you're not being paid, but you're starting that organization, you're going to hire somebody, that's when you need to establish that. Whenever you're going to start to have, start paying an individual. And I'm going to talk about why. I'm going to talk about how, and I am going to take this very, very scary overlaying comp program and try to break it down. So when you leave here, you can go back and really start working if you like to. So again, my name is Annie Koo Thornquist. I am with Nonprofit HR, and I am here to present to you not only the comp plan, but as I just had previously mentioned, she talked about the disparities, right? I'm just going to touch a little bit about that because this is the perfect time to really look at that and break that system. Break that systemic lowering paying of BIPOC staff, of female staff, really having a chance to look at that because you get to see all the figures. I know it's also scary, but never fear. We have a member here, Lorianne, who's going to share with us how she walked through it and some of the challenges she faced. And then I will then come back and take over. I did want to just start with a couple of things. So this is a quote that really resonated, especially when it came to the whole wage compensation and paying people and how much do we pay and why. I hear well, we're a nonprofit, we just don't have the funds. We've got to really think about it differently. It's just really a mind shift change. And so what I'd like for you to do here is just quickly drop into chat just so I can make sure, because I have a full-fledged objectives and agenda, but I want to make sure I touch on what you really want to hear as well. So if you have anything you want to make sure I touch on or that you glimpse from this session, please drop it into chat. I will make a note and make sure that before we get to questions and answers, I've addressed this or at least given you some resource in order to handle it. Now, the reason I have Robert Bosch up here, besides this really neat quote, is not, at first I was like, oh, Bosch, I don't know if anybody watches the detective show, but I'm a big fan. But he invented the spark plug and he started that whole stationary engine, which I was like, I don't understand that. My husband's like, oh, that's a really amazing person. But what he did, he's a social pioneer in introducing the 8-hour workday. They were having these tremendous hours and working people just, to death, really. And he pioneered this 8-hour workday, somebody who was making this product that was being demanded. He, instead of saying, we're going to keep working people, he social engineered the 8-hour workday. So anybody here can really have that type of impact, is what I'm trying to say. Later on, he goes on to donate to technical education schools and hospitals to really kind of work on the educational, tactical type of work for the community. So today's agenda, we got a full-fledged agenda. Like I mentioned earlier, one of your colleagues is going to get up and share her experience. We're going to talk about the compensation philosophy, types of compensation. I'm not going to read it because you can see it. But what we're going to do is I'm going to have some interaction, okay? I know it's been hard sitting, looking at a screen. So I'm going to have you work a little bit. We're going to do breakout sessions. I'm going to give you a job description. I'm going to have you use the guide and try to find out how to price them, as well as how to, if you have an incumbent, how to make sure they're in the market. So we're going to do a lot of hands-on, and I want you just to be comfortable with that. There are no wrong answers. Doing this is a little bit of a journey. We're going to succeed in some, and we're going to have challenges in others, and I'm sure Lorianne's going to be able to share that with you. And give me 1 second while I switch that over so that I can put her presentation up and she can do her own introduction here. Oh. Okay, Lorianne?
Yes.
All right, I don't know if people can see you. Unfortunately, I've lost my Zoom look.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see.
Hopefully
Okay.
most of you can see me. So Annie's going to switch the slides for me from her screen. So we're going to just jump in. Annie has asked me to do a short case study on the compensation work that we did from the 2016 Nonprofit Center study. And so I'm just going to walk you through a little bit, and this presentation will be made available after the presentation for you too. So you'll have the notes. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Many of you I know that are on the call, and if you don't know me, I'm Lorianne Whittington. I'm the CEO at Pine Castle. And next slide, Annie. At Pine Castle, our mission is to serve adults with intellectual and developmental differences through opportunities to learn, work, and connect. And our vision is to pursue a community where people with intellectual and developmental differences achieve their potential for independence. So that's a little bit about what we do as a nonprofit. Next slide. This is a picture of some of our individuals. So you can kind of put a face with our mission to see what we do. And on the next slide, Annie, we just going to go ahead and jump into our compensation challenges. I became the CEO at Pine Castle in November of 2017. And my predecessor, who had been here 26 years in his position, left me with the #1 challenge of they were not keeping up with the market on minimum wages. So the board, everybody, the staff, my senior leadership, the outgoing CEO said, this is what we have to deal with. The first thing, this is the first thing on your list to fix. And so, of course, I jumped right in to try to see what we needed to do. I think we were above the Florida minimum wage at the time, but we were paying only about $9.50 an hour for our entry-level workers. So as we began to look at this issue, we realized it was not a single issue. It had multifaceted things attached to it. So the real issues were some of these that I've listed on the screen. And actually, the more we looked into this issue, the more things we found that were impacting compensation as a whole. So what started out as a minimum wage problem became a compensation plan problem. So we were behind our competitors in the market on entry-level wages. Our staff had not had raises in 8 years since the 2008 recession, 9 years. Benefits had been cut, hours had been cut from 40 hours a week to 35 hours a week. So most of our workers were hourly. Just to let you know, Pine Castle has about a $6 million budget and we have 145 employees. So it's a big employee core for a nonprofit. The annual performance evaluation had been stopped because it was kind of like, well, if we can't give raises, then why should we do performance evaluations? So they had performance issues all over the place that hadn't been dealt with because they perceived it as only being tied to compensation. The management had decided, well, we can't raise wages. So if we have extra money at the end of the fiscal year, which was September 30th, we'll give everybody a bonus and we'll base it on tenure. So the people that have been here longer get bigger bonuses. And then they turned around and did the same thing at Christmas, and they give a Christmas bonus 2 months later based on tenure. So all this money was going out the door in bonuses, but there was no performance evaluation. There was no wage structure. There was no way to raise wages. So let's go to the next slide. So then we said, okay, we've got to research all of this. We got to figure out what we need to do. We got to figure out what we don't understand. And so we spoke to colleagues that I had known and other organizations that had addressed this with the consultant, found out what they did. This person recommended a book on compensation, Solving the Compensation Puzzle by Sharon Cost. So that might be a resource that you all might want to check out. We also worked with executives at the Society of Human Resources, the SHRM Society. We attended some of their seminars. They had invited us to speak as a featured nonprofit, so they comped us some seminars. And so we sort of built a partnership with them to learn a little bit about what we didn't know. We had a loaned executive from Baptist Health. They were starting a skills-based volunteer program. And they said, do you need any executives with certain skills? And we said, we need somebody in HR to help us with compensation. So that was really helpful. And he stayed with us for 6 months and answered a lot of our questions. He was the head of HR at Baptist South. So he was one of our guys. And so then we did a lot of internet research. So we did a lot of homework at the front end. So let's go to the next slide. So as part of this process, we really did a full internal review, like I said, of everything that was affecting compensation. In addition to those bonuses that I talked about in the fiscal year and Christmas bonuses, there were performance bonuses in place for certain sales staff, development staff. There was all these little kind of deals around that were made with individual staff. And they were kind of, I wouldn't say under the table, but they were just like, you know, kind of one-off sort of deals. They weren't part of a whole strategy. So those were in place. We had overtime issues. Overtime was kind of out of control. And then also we had wage compression, which is where longtime tenured employees are making the same as an entry level. So as we raised the entry level wages, then the people that had been here 10 or 15 years were still making the same as somebody that just walked in the door. And then there was some associated structural issues, like we had to go back through and look at all the exempt employees and make sure we had that all straight with the legal compliance, because some of that was out of order on who should be hourly and who should be salaried. So we had to fix that. And then we were also using paper time cards for 145 employees and another almost 200 participants that were working in our on-site training workshops. So we had 4 to 5 staff managing paper time cards every single week. So we went immediately to a time clock system that was automated. It's very inexpensive. It's called UAttend. Really great system. I think there's only like $200 a time clock. So it was very reasonable. The software is very low priced. So that helped us get a handle on actual hours and people that were falsifying time cards or adding 15 minutes here or there. We immediately had savings in that. So that affected compensation. We saved some money there. We also surveyed all of our staff on the 35 versus 45-hour work week. They had cut the work week in 2008. And what we found is a lot of people were okay with the 35-hour work week because they were doing second jobs in the afternoon and they wanted to get out at 3 o'clock. So we changed it for certain jobs, but we kept it for the most part, but we involved the employees in that. Then we also developed an agency value statement because we wanted to communicate to our employees, you know, what we value. So we worked on that with our board. And then finally, we did develop succession planning for all of our C-level staff and myself. And then for any department directors that were about to retire, we developed succession plans for them. Because when I started, my predecessor said there was 5 senior leaders that were going to retire in the next 2 years. They've all now retired except for 1. So we did all of those things. So next slide. So then we started building a wage grid. And with all of that information, this is where the Nonprofit Center Compensation Study came in. So we used the Nonprofit Center study from 2016 from here in Northeast Florida. We also used the Nonprofit Center of Orlando study, and we used our own industry study, the Intellectual and Developmental Differences industry. Our association had done a study. So we used all 3 of those studies the first time, and we actually kind of looked at the GuideStar national study, but it was just not comparable. So we ended up not using that, but our chief operating officer at the time worked with our chief financial officer, and they built a grid. And I have given that to Annie, the blank grid, and she's going to share that with you after in the materials. But basically, we list all the positions down the left side, and then we list the wage grades across the top. So you'll have that to look at. And we have minimum wage, 25th percentile, excuse me, 50th percentile, 75th, and then maximum. So what we did is we went to the compensation study and we pulled off those comparable numbers for that position. We looked at every single position in the company for 145 people. And of course, we have many positions that are the same. We have maybe 40 positions that are all direct support professionals. So that was all the same. So then we took time, we took about 3 months to kind of look at each position, analyze where they were, analyze where they should be at the market level. And then we added tenure on top of it. So we decided, and I'll talk about our compensation philosophy in a second, we decided that we wanted to compensate for tenure. So at 3 years, they would automatically be at the 25th percentile, at 8 years, the 50th, at 15 years, the 75th, and at 25 years, the maximum. So there's debate about that. People say, you know, you should only base it on performance or do you base it on tenure? And we had a lot of really long time employees, but we wanted tenure to be part of the mix. And that was just our choice as part of our compensation philosophy. You certainly don't have to do that with your organization, but this is just kind of how our case worked. You'll see that grid and you'll see how that all got plugged in. It's just blank. It doesn't have the numbers, but you can see how it got put together. So then this was really the biggest part of the project. And it has become our guideline for our future decisions. Whenever somebody says, well, I feel like I need a raise, well, then we say, well, let's look at the comp study and where are you at and where's your tenure and what should you be making according to the market? And then, of course, there's opportunity for performance review every year. We put that back in place and merits. And so if they're not at, let's say, where they've been here 3 years and they're not equal to where they should be 25% of the market, even though they've gotten performance raises, then they automatically get an adjustment during their 3-year anniversary month to that 25th percentile. And we budget for that every year. So we look at the budget, we project who we need to adjust every year for tenure. And so that's just become a part of our operating system. Next slide. So then we developed, as I mentioned, a compensation philosophy. And I know Annie's going to talk about this a lot. We approached it as a whole person project. We wanted it to not just be financial. We wanted it to be benefits and financial. So some of the things are listed here on the slide. We made sure the salaries were market rates. Like I said, it takes out the guesswork. It takes out arbitrary decisions. We put in the wage grades. We put back the performance review. We haven't achieved the 3% merit pool because of COVID and some other things, but we're working towards that. We're looking at our retirement plan offerings. Currently, we contribute 3% after they've been here 1 year with no match required. We looked at PTO benefits. They had an annual, there's a payout of 40 days if they leave the organization and they're in good standing. They also can cash out up to 10 days if they have excess PTO. We're looking at that policy. And then federal holidays, we're off 2 weeks at Christmas. And then we started doing an annual paycheck, hidden paycheck statements. So we worked with our insurance and payroll person, our vendors, our vendors. And we give them a statement every year that says, this is what you made in salary. This is what Pine Castle paid in your benefits. This is what you were paid for vacation. And so it starts to give the employees a total picture of their compensation. Next slide. This is just the rest of the compensation philosophy. We added social, mental, physical, and training elements. Employee of the month, anniversary cash bonuses of like $100 or $200 based on your tenure. We put back an annual Christmas party for the whole staff, which they seem to really like. Under mental, we made sure that we paid for an employee assistance program, and that was super helpful during COVID, that we already had that in place, that anybody was struggling with any kind of financial counseling, whatever, we provided that for free. We started a suggestion box again. Under physical, we have our regular benefits, medical, dental, vision. We partnered with PATH, which is a nonprofit formed by Baptist and YMCA to do annual screenings and they're free of charge. They do blood pressure, cholesterol, health screenings. They do a quiz, and then we get aggregate results on what are the biggest issues of our workforce. Is it sleep deprivation? Is it stress? Is it depression? And then they come back and they offer classes in those particular things. We don't know who individuals, but we can see aggregate numbers out of our 145 staff. So that was really a good program we put in place. We have a walking track. We started walking hours. And then we put a lot of different trainings in place, our onboarding, our industry required trainings. During COVID, we switched from in-person trainings to online trainings. And now our employees that were kind of dragging their feet on wanting to do things electronically, they took over 176 courses online during COVID, which was great. And then we do in-person training twice a year. We have an apprenticeship program for our entry-level employees. And we've done things like strength finders for our leadership team. So as you can see, this is much more than just their paycheck. We try to make it very well-rounded, and we look at the whole package of employee benefits and compensation. So next slide. So then after 6 months, it took us about 6 months to do all this work. So people ask me, how long did this take? It takes some time. And we met weekly with our internal comp team to kind of keep moving on these benchmarks and research and pieces of this puzzle to keep chipping away to get everything together that we needed to get together. And then during that time, we also met with staff monthly in our regular staff meeting. We gave them progress reports of what we were working on. They knew we were working on compensation updates. We had FAQs at every meeting on where we were at and where we were going, and that was really helpful. I started in November. We had to pay the December bonus because people were already expecting it, but we announced right after that there was going to be no more end of year bonuses and fiscal year bonuses, end of fiscal year and end of calendar year, Christmas. That was equal to about $200,000 a year. So when I started looking at what we needed to do, I mean, that was a pot of money that was sort of being deployed, maybe not in the best way. So when you can see on the slide, when we added up the gap, the wage gap, and where our staff were and where they needed to be to market, adjusted for tenure and all of that, it was a $465,000 wage gap on a $6 million annual budget. So it was not small. And so what we did is we presented 3 scenarios to the board of directors: an immediate adjustment, an adjustment over 1.5 years, so we would phase it in, or an adjustment over 3 years. So our CFO kind of broke it down and calculated, what it would impact the agency to do it over time or immediately. And so to the board's credit, when they realized that, we sort of had this 200,000 that was part of that. So you bring that down, it really is only an impact of about 265,000 if we redeployed the bonuses. They voted for an immediate adjustment. And so we have a little bit of a long-term fund for Pine Castle. And so we thought at worst case, we had projected out, we may have to borrow 100,000 from the long-term fund to kind of get us up to that level and get us going on the right track. But we ended up not having to do that. So we have stayed on the track. We got that done in 2018. The board voted, I think, in May, and the adjustments took place in June. And every single person in the agency, except for me as the new CEO, got an increase. And some of them got significant increases based on their tenure. So it was very personalized. Each person got what they were due according to the market rates and their tenure. So that was a lot of number crunching, but we felt like it was very, very fair. Okay, next slide. So this is kind of my last slide. This is just to say, this work is never done. And so there's things that we're still working on that we want to continue to improve in our compensation plan. We're going to do more work on our retirement planning. We've developed a board oversight committee that was just voted on last month to do our annual 5,500 retirement audit and planning. We're probably going to do a new RFP. We're going to look at our whole retirement system and see if we want to still contribute 3% without a match requirement, or we want to change that going forward. We're going to continue to look at our PTO policies. We're going to continue to work on putting a full 3% merit pool in place. I know Annie's going to talk about minimum wage, so that's something that we're going to deal with. And as part of our compensation philosophy, which I really forgot until I was preparing for this presentation, because we did this back in 2018, and we said we always want to be at least $1 above the Florida minimum wage. So that's the standard we have set. So we have to prepare for that for next year. And then we're also now taking a look at the 2020 study that Isis just talked about. We've already done an analysis for our directors and above, and we're in the process of doing an analysis for the staff below the director level to figure out, do we have a new gap? How much is that, from the study we did from 2016 and the adjustments we did in 2018. So we're working on that this year. And then finally, we're implementing a full electronic human resources information system for even more automation around our programs, our benefits, our training will be all integrated. our payroll. So we're taking another step from just the paper tracking to the time cards to the full HR system. So those are things we're still working on. We still have compensation team meetings once a quarter. So we don't meet weekly anymore as we were when we were developing this, but now we're meeting quarterly. And so I think that's it. What's the next slide, Isis? I think that's just my closing slide. I don't know if we have time for questions, Annie, but if we do, I'll take them. Or if not, my contact information is on the last slide and you guys can feel free to reach out to me.
So we do have a quick question, Lorianne, if you don't mind taking it. And Rachel, I see that you put it into the chat, but I don't know if you want to just come off mute and ask if you're able to. If not, I'm happy to ask it for you.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Isis. Good morning. Thank you so much for that insightful presentation. It was really helpful to learn from your work. I was just curious because I've heard mixed thoughts on this. In your compensation plan, when you look at sort of there's obviously different pay scales for different levels. So manager, associate, director, assistant. But I'm wondering how you have, or in your study and analysis, and perhaps a nonprofit center as well, how you all have seen different staff roles based on function. So at the director level, is it a comparable or exactly the same scale for development directors, program directors, finance directors? Just wondering about best practices on that.
That's a great question. And really, because of the depth of the nonprofit survey, it really covers all of those positions. So for example, you'll see program director on our grid when you get a copy of the grid. So we have 4 program directors and they all are in the same scale, but one runs our day training program, one runs our employment program, one runs our mental health program. So they're all kind of in the same. But then we have a business director, we have a chief development officer. So those are different. And so you can see on the comp study that the nonprofit center did, those ranges are different. And so we just looked at each one individually and compared it to what the market will bear. So they are different, but there could be a group of employees that all have the title of program director that would be in the same range, or there may be direct support professional. We have 40 of those, they would all be in the same range. So it was just different types of positions, but it could be different numbers of people. I hope that answered your question.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, were there any other questions I didn't see? Sorry.
I think that's the only question we had in the chat, but if we get any others, I'll send them your way, Lorianne. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So I will just continue. Lorianne, thank you so much. I had the absolute pleasure of connecting with her, and when she shared her story, I just felt it was so relevant to be able to hear somebody go through all of that and know that yes, it does take some time, but it is not so undaunting that it is to be feared, right? And there are ways to get around that. There are ways to get past that. And I just hope that she inspired you just a little bit. I know she inspired me to face this work. So are you seeing my screen by chance?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Sorry. I'm sorry I have to keep asking this. I have it on 2 different screens and it looks odd on my side. So we talked a lot about compensation philosophy, compensation philosophy, compensation philosophy. So you're probably thinking, wow, that's another thing I've got to write. We already have a handbook. Now what is all this? So the compensation philosophy, and I thought Lorianne did such a great job on it. I mean, it wasn't a one paragraph statement, though it may have been able to be summed up that way, because I think she talked about it really treating somebody holistically, right? But this is just beyond the, attract, retain, and motivate, which is the typical mindset of a compensation philosophy, right? This is how we're going to keep our people, and this is what we want to do. So part of it is important, and that is somewhat the focus, but I also want you to expand it just a little bit. So the compensation philosophy is really just a formal statement documenting your company's position about compensation. It's the why behind the employee pay and creating a framework of consistency. You heard what Lorianne said about they value tenure. Not all organizations going to do that. So it is where you as an organization feel you want to put some focus on, right? And I loved how she actually indicated that it was about tenure instead of retention, because a lot of people would try to lump that into retention, and it feels a little different because it's not being very specific. It's okay to have the umbrella of attract, motivate, and retain, but there are specifics that you really should be focusing on and really looking towards. So the compensation philosophy is kind of the little puzzle piece that brings things together just a little bit. And I wanted to talk about some of those philosophies in looking at the broader framework of attracting, retaining, and motivating. I love this quote that someone had. It is cheaper to grow your own tomatoes than to go buy them in the market, right? You know, to homegrown, to kind of develop your own staff, that whole retention, the knowledge that they have right there and then, and that they would leave, that relationship they have, especially with nonprofits, right? But in the middle of winter, you may need a tomato and you really don't have a choice. So sometimes we talk about those unexpected retirements, or somebody just gets a better opportunity and leaves, or they just decide they want to focus on something else. And all of that knowledge goes away. So what do? We want you to be prepared for those. So it's creating a clear thought process behind that. So in the philosophy portion of it, this is, I mentioned again, the attract, retain, motivate. So what I want you to do is the compensation philosophy a lot of times are couched under these three areas, right? Attracting or retaining, right? New talent or finding new talent, leading the market or lagging the market. You know, and then the external equities, meaning we're going to be competitive, or are we really going to focus on the internal equities, as Lorianne said about the tenure. So what I'd like for you to do is on your in your Zoom options, there is, I think you click onto annotate. Does anybody see that? I think it might be under more. And there's a little annotate button. I'd like for you to click onto that annotate, hit onto the stamp, and then just check mark where you are feeling like you want to have a little bit of more focus. You've got some thoughts behind that you are leaning towards in terms of this compensation philosophy. And I'm gonna keep talking as you're looking for the annotate in order to do that on the screen. So, you know, identifying a well-designed compensation philosophy supports the strategic plan, the goals and objectives, and the competitive outlook. It really kind of looks at the whole package. And I'm going to talk about compensation plan a little more because it's not just about pay. It seeks to identify the organization's pay programs, total reward strategy, identify how you're going to pay, especially in light of some of the challenges that come up, right? Minimum wage does come up. Unfortunately, this pandemic was unexpected, but it did come up. It should also, when you think about your compensation philosophy, it should also pass a series of, I would call quality tests. Is the overall program equitable? Later on, I will talk about that. Is this program defensible and perceived as fair by your employees? Is this program fiscally sensitive and thoughtful, right? We are fiduciary responsible to our donors and to our funders when it comes to utilizing their fund. Are the programs included in the compensation philosophy and policy legally compliant? Are we doing things that could, even though we may see that as a benefit, but could get us into some challenges there? And is it communicated effectively? Do the employees know where you stand and what you're about? Lorianne spoke about almost going on a road show with this, you know, talking to the employees on a constant basis in terms of what they're doing, being fully and totally transparent, which is so important. So I'm seeing those check marks come in. Thank you so much. So I'm seeing them all over the place. This is great. So one of the things I wanted to share with you when it comes to this is I am working with a nonprofit right now, and we are working and looking at their total comps structure. And they are an advocacy group. And what we recognize and realize that, they had such rich benefits, anywhere from the medical benefits to their pay time off, to just array of other benefits they provided. They had they closed between Christmas and New Year's. They had 30 days in a year of vacation, and then they had various other pay times off and sick days and such. So they were leading the market in benefits. But when it came to their compensation, they weren't. And they weren't leading the market, but they felt that their benefit package and everything else they provided a nice mix. So they focused also on being able to communicate that out. So all I'm trying to say in that is no two benefits and compensation philosophy programs are going to look alike. It is very unique and individual to who your organization is and what you want. I know I talked about compensation philosophy. I really want to just touch a little bit on the strategy, because the strategy, some people use it interchangeably, and some people are, no, they're absolutely different. The intention is to really have a reward policy or program and process that ties into the overall philosophy. We want to be leading in this area. We want to be, because we have the hard to fill market, we want to be very competitive. So we're going to focus on the business strategy of things and compensate that way. You may have a shortage in staff, and so that is where your philosophy is going to go. So you just want to be aware that there's so many other pieces that really tie into this compensation strategy. The legal requirements. I'm going to talk about minimum wage. I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet on how you can maybe start looking at it, or giving you some framework to start with that. What are the labor conditions? I remember first starting in HR, this was quite some time ago, like the IT positions were hot commodities. I mean, we were pulling people out of high school, and paying them like $100,000 to do IT work. I mean, it was crazy. But during that time, that was a hot market. So you really had to look at and then again, adjust your philosophy, or really relook at that in terms of the overall impact of where you want to you wanted to go. So I'm going to talk about types of compensation. In the beginning, it was a bartering system, right? The money, there wasn't necessarily, before the introduction of actual money, it was exchange goods for services, or goods for goods, right? If the reason I put that out there is the barter system worked in a way, but it didn't, because you had to find value in that good or service, right? That has moved financial. So someone needs to find value in those financials, wages that you're paying in order to come work for you. So you've got to think about how that comes into play. Now, sorry. Goodness gracious, I kind of went too far. So wages, pure and simple, wages are hourly, daily, or weekly, or even piece rate. So those are what they get paid, right? So wages or salary are the amount that they get paid. Straight salary can be paid on an hourly basis, and they work 40 hours, or they work on a salary basis and they've got a set amount. That is all dependent on your FLSA coding for your staff. I'm assuming everybody just thumbs up if everybody understands what the FLSA means. And I've lost everybody's picture.
It might be helpful. I see a few thumbs up, but it might be helpful if you have a quick just definition for that.
Okay, FLSA. So this is a regulation that is required by the government. So what they're saying is there are certain jobs, certain duties and responsibilities that you can have employees do where you can pay them a set wage to get the work done. And so that is not dependent on the number of hours worked. Okay. And so they can, but because of the type of work they have to work, they have to have a minimum salary of over a certain amount. And they have to have certain specific duties that they perform in order to qualify as salaried employees. Then you have your hourly employees. They don't qualify. They're called non-exempt. So they clock in their hours. And it's not because they're a lesser employee, it's because the government does not recognize them in such a way where we can pay them a salary. The biggest difference about this is the way you pay them overtime. On a non-exempt employee, you do not, you pay overtime. So every hour they work over the 40 hours gets overtime. Your salaried exempt employees do not get overtime. And so if they work 50 hours in that week because there is a project or there is an event and they are coded correctly as exempt employees, you do not pay overtime for them. Oh, so, thumbs up. If you go into reaction, oh, thank you. So does that make sense? So commission, and if I need to stop, please stop me. So commission-based is a percentage of sales. Now I say this because there are some positions where there is a commission type feel to it. Most nonprofits don't have that because there is a concern about it. There is a concern about the nonprofit status being challenged if you start treating our employees like you would another organization that may be similar in terms of sales. So that does not necessarily always happen, but it has, and that's just what it is. They have a minimum wage, and then on top of that, as an incentive, they get a percentage in order to, whether it is sales. The challenge people have is sales sometimes translates into development. And when you start doing development and trying to do a percentage of that, it creates a lot of problems. And if you need more explanation on that, I'm happy to talk to you offline on that. And then piece rate. So there are places where they do piece rate. So the piece rate would be paid for production of per item. So you make so many items within a day, you do so many functions within so many specific items, or, mechanic, you fix so many cars within the day that has this problem, oil change or something, you get paid per car. The challenge with that is that, again, has to equal at least minimum wage at the end of the work week. So your minimum wage right now is $8.56. They work 40 hours. They need to have made a minimum of $342.40 for that week. Let's say their piece rate ended up being $400 for the week. The wages are fine because it's above the minimum wage. However, let's say that week was just a bad week and they ended up making $300. Well, the company or the organization has to make up the difference of $42.40 for them because they have to still be at the minimum wage. And that's if they work 40 hours. So I mentioned that your compensation is well beyond just minimum, just pay. I want to share with you a little bit about total rewards. Yes, financial is part of it, your wages, and that's where we're going to talk about the wage guide and such. But there's also the benefits. So start thinking about what percentage of benefits is being contributed. Again, I mentioned earlier, the organization I am helping right now, they are leading in that industry. They pay 90% of the employee's premium. And so the employee only pays 10, and that's regardless of which coverage they go with. They can go with family, which is, as we all know, pretty high. They will pay 90% of that premium, and the employees only pay 10. But that's where they wanted to focus on. there is also other options in terms of the financial where it is an impact in a way. Sick pay, unemployment, compensation, Social Security. The reason I'm listing this out is because I'm going to show you that total comp statement, which Lori Ann had mentioned was called the hidden paycheck statement that they give on an annual basis. Non-financial. Employee discounts. I think she had mentioned there was a partnership with, I think it was PATH and the YMCA doing these screenings. That is a non-financial benefit. It is a great way for them to get not only a benchmark for themselves to create wellness programs, but also a way for employees to feel that they are being taken care of in that way. Recognition, flexible work schedules, remote work schedules. And I also put on here favorable work situations. So favorable work situations is non-financial, but if there is like, when I worked for the YMCA of the USA, we had different regions that we were in charge with, and everybody wanted to take over Hawaii. That was a favorable work situation. To be able to go help support Hawaii was a perk. It's not paid necessarily, except when you travel there, but that was that little bit of a perk. So let's just kind of give you an idea. Also the staff development, again, in terms of what Lorianne shared, she talked about the strength finder. She talked about all those trainings, the succession plan, things that are intentional. And when I'm talking about total rewards, I'm talking about intentional, not the happenstance. Like, oh yeah, look, we've got this great benefit. We get, fancy coffee, if those are part of what you're trying to structure, then make sure that you're calling those out, because unfortunately we forget and we may take things for granted. Now, I'd like to get everybody's thought on this, right? So in chat, can you think of something that your organization is doing so we can maybe get some ideas? And when we go back to our offices later on this afternoon, maybe come up with one or two nuggets that we think, God, that could be a great opportunity as part of our rewards program. So what are you doing that contributes to your total rewards? What is your organization doing? Or maybe what do you think might be a fun, neat idea that is different that employees can see as a total rewards option? Gym memberships, maybe, daycare options. I know with COVID, not very many people are even going to daycare or dropping their kids off at daycare, but just drop into chat so we can kind of get a sense of what that, what you think and maybe what makes your organization unique.
So Annie, we've got some answers coming in already. Someone mentioned exercise classes, a day off during your birthday month, Christmas bonuses, closed for Christmas break and spring break, birthdays off. At the Jackson School for Autism, they provide free supervision for staff working towards BCBA credentialing, and this saves employees $50 per hour for credentialing. Free meals during their shift at the cafeteria, employee discounts for organization services. We've got a lot of good answers coming in.
Wow. So hopefully someone, maybe I said you can take a screenshot or kind of download those and share them after. I think those are so neat because a lot of times we get stuck with what we're doing. Having some ideas might help you expand and look at different ways to look at total rewards and really have a robust rewards package that you can really use as part of your employer brand when it comes to that first, recruiting retention concept, which I think a few of you had indicated as a desire. So I think we can really see how having some of these thought out is helpful. So I'm going to tell you real quickly the benefits of a compensation program. So typically one of the largest resources and largest expenses you have are your employees, are their pay, right? So and for good reason. excuse me, they drive your financial performance, they drive efficiency, it helps to retain and attract the best. Plus, it really helps look at diversifying your pool, right? So maybe you can't pay the highest, but you can sure provide, support for education, for tuition reimbursement, or childcare when someone's going through these courses, or whatever the case is. I mean, those are huge benefits, and those definitely help. So these are important factors. So proportionality. So how are you comparing to the market? Is really important. How are your employees comparing to each other in terms of fairness? Now, I will tell you, employees talk. So, there is going to be some sense. Lorianne talked about tenure. Again, there's going to be talk about that, right? So, where is their perception of fairness when it comes to the market, right? And then where is it compared to Paris when it comes to procedural, meaning when the whether there be adjustments come out, promotional opportunities, merit increases come out, is there a fairness behind it? And that is really important to just be aware of. So are you paying your staff in such a way that you're being thoughtful behind it? And what I mean by that is, let's just say the hiring range is 50 to 70, okay? Candidate A comes in and they were previously making 45 and they're willing to take 50. Candidate B comes in and they're already making 55 and they're really looking for 60 or even 70. And so they're at the top of the range, right? You really like candidate A. You really like them. Candidate B is just as strong. And at this point, you're willing to take either of them because they're both equally strong. But you decide to take candidate A and offer them 50. Candidate A is also a female staff. And so what happens is we end up creating the systemic inequity in pay. Just because they're willing to take less doesn't mean we should pay less. And I say that, and I know that I may get like some looks like, well, we are a nonprofit, we need to pay, we've got to get the best bang for the buck. But if you were willing and able to turn around and take candidate B without a problem because they were equally strong, and candidate A for some reason said no, and you were willing to pay candidate B 70, the wage for that position is 70, not 50. I don't know if that makes sense. And I can't see. So if you're nodding, yes. If you're shaking your head, I'm sorry, I can't see that. But the reason I'm saying this is because that is where systemic inequities occur, is when you're willing and able to pay, but because this person, because we know how much this person is making, and you believe that we can get I hate to say this, the best bang for our buck, you go low. And this creates a systemic inequities, because when this person leaves maybe in 3 to 5 years, they're still making low. And so the next employer does the same thing, and the next employer does the same thing, and the next employer does the same thing. I don't know if you can see the pattern that comes from that. So that's just something we want to be very much aware of. And I also mention this because there are many organizations that are now having to file and complete an equity pay report annually. California is one of the first ones that are moving that way, and that's starting March 2021, and I'm sure other states are going to soon follow. But just to kind of be thinking of trends and on the forefront of what's happening, that could be coming down the pipeline. Performance, how does that tie into your compensation strategy? Are you tying, and this is something that Lorianne mentioned, are you tying your merit based on performance? Many people do, and that's fine, but then when you aren't able to compensate, then the performance goes away, and then that feedback goes away, and that could cause problems. So just thinking about how you want to organize that. You can, but it could be separate too. How does that tie into your organizational goals? Is it job-related performance into compensation? Those are all things that you can tie in, but it may not be tied into merit. It may be tied into how you end up adjusting them or paying them, whether at the 25th, 50th, or 75th percentile, based on the impact that they have. We talked a little bit about recruitment and retention. This again is that employer brand. What are you telling people out in the community in terms of what you're paying? Not necessarily like this is our comp program, but again, staff talk. Glassdoor is huge when it comes to how people are treated during the hiring and interview process. Having a comp program gives some transparency where people understand and are aware where they stand in the organization and how they could get additional resources if they either grow in terms of their own self in their own position, or they grow within the organization in terms of a career lattice. And then is it competitive with market? So just those little key areas. So I mentioned a little bit about the inequities, and I just wanted to show this because it is very, very real, and I'm sure you hear it all the time. And you know, then we're all thinking, well, what can we do to stop it, right? This is Google, and what they ended up doing is using their own document. They had a shared Google document. Everybody was sharing their own wages in terms of, you know, race, age, gender specifically, and they actually shared this. And there's definitely disparities here. And all this is to say, I pointed this out, it is pervasive, it is systemic, and it continues. And as people who are working and wanting to have a comp plan, you can break the cycle. And it takes time, and it's not easy, and it takes a little bit of a buy-in, but you can break the cycle. And I think part of it is just the awareness of how to go about doing it. And I kind of mentioned a way, especially when it comes to the recruiting part, right? You know, what you're able to pay and what you're willing to pay, and really challenging yourself on those two aspects. So I mentioned earlier about the total rewards. So we have pay, and we talked about those great ideas, whether they're food from the cafeteria. I'm not sure how you can possibly quantify that, but I'm sure there is a way. But on your total compensation statement here, this is not an inclusive list, by the way, and this is not my specific comp statement, but I wanted to show you one. And the reason I'm showing you this one specifically is because it is not just words. There's some graphics, there's some color, it makes it interesting. And I want to make sure that we're not just sending staff just something really general or generic in terms of just a letter. We want to make it interesting. We want to make it see that there are different buckets, not just all in base pay and then all the taxes that you contribute on their behalf, and the vacation times, and then those intangibles that they may not necessarily see or get. And by the way, they may not use. You may have an amazing tuition reimbursement program that only 10% of your staff are using. This is a great way to educate and highlight that. Now, I'm just going to stop for just a second to see if there are any questions.
No questions yet, Annie.
Okay, thank you. So this is, I think I saw all those great ideas. This is that uniqueness that you have in your organization that you can add to the total comp station, this total comp statement. This is also part of that transparency, that communicating your comp philosophy, where you stand. It's not necessarily a salary range, you know, or you know, how much you're making bottom line, but really the total rewards impact. Just curious, and using your reaction piece, how many people are have a comp statement? If you want to use your thumbs up, thumbs down kind of.
So we've got a couple of no's. We got a laughing face. I don't know if that's a if that's a no or a yes. And for folks that are curious about where the reaction is, again, it's just located on the bottom of your navigation panel under reactions.
I was trying to see if I can see everybody's faces. I like to see people. This virtual training is really challenging for me. You know, there is definitely an opportunity here. By the way, and I think, no, that was a crying face. So this is definitely, I won't say simple, but this is such a great way to communicate um, your desire to help your staff, right? This is a very simple, it is simple way to do that. The time consuming is really pulling all these pieces together and then putting it into this nice little statement. I would check with your benefit brokers. Many benefit brokers has this readily available. Many payroll providers also do, depending on who you have, they have this readily available. If not, you can definitely pull this information and do a mail merge. Obviously, we're looking at somebody who probably has a pretty significant experience in designing this, but you can definitely do this. And it does take a little bit of time, but once you get it set up, it makes it a little easier. And it is nice, again, trying to use some graphics, trying to use some colors. And many people look forward to that. Now, I do get the question, well, Annie, after this, they usually go and find another job. Well, they may or may not. I have seen people use this as, wow, I see the value in this. Now you're probably thinking, okay, got total compensation. I understand why we need a comp philosophy. I get what total rewards are. I understand the benefits of a comp plan. I see what a comp statement can do for me. So help me, help me build this comp plan, right? Remember what Lorianne said, it takes time. So be prepared. I wanted to just quickly share with you, and this is not what we're going to cover, but this is the advanced version of building a compensation plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten some of these so that it makes it a little bit more easier for you, okay? Because I know sometimes when you look at this, you're like, gosh, that's a lot of work. You know, first of all, first and foremost, and this is going to look very similar to your the basics of building a comp plan, you do need to have a compensation philosophy. You do need to determine, and this is well before you start planning, so don't put the cart before the horse, right? You need to have a approach. You need to understand what your philosophy is in terms of compensation. You need to have that mindset of what drives pay decision. You need to really figure out, are you leading, lagging, or matching the market? And that's perfectly fine. And what does that mean? And how does that look? And then the next step is, then you pull up all your jobs and do a job analysis. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail there, but the job analysis is just gathering documents and literally analyzing and determining the activities and responsibilities included, the relative to the job, the qualifications, and then you group them into job families or tiers, like positions, whether they be administrative, technical, management, and then you do a ranking using a job evaluation method, and those are the points method. Again, we're not going to do that. And then you go and do some market research. Then you create the job grades, and not create, but create salary based on research, and then you age the data. All of these are very important, but some of them, again, based on the size of your nonprofit, you may not have the people to do this, right? And you may have to call in an expert. Well, we're trying to make this so that you can at least take steps in doing this. So, number one, determine your compensation philosophy. First and foremost, and this is the basics, right? I mentioned the cumbersome advanced version, but this is the basics. Determine your compensation philosophy. Still most important. And then you pull a report of all current employees. I'm telling you, we've got to skip some of the steps, right? I'm trying to consolidate this, make it so it's tangible for you to do. And what I would do is, from your payroll system, from your HRI system, this is the information I would pull. Name, title, of course, date of hire, salary, FLSA status, and if possible, I would also pull in gender and race so that you can do a pay equity check in this process. I would highly recommend doing that. But I also know that makes it a little challenging because there's a lot that is going on, but you start doing that first. Okay, then you organize those, right? You organize them by job title. So again, I'm trying to skip over some of the steps there because those analysis may take a little more time. You organize them by job title, then you start looking at the job descriptions, and you look at the relevant day-to-day responsibilities, the experience, and the years of experience and the experience needed, and some of the soft skills. And you start grouping them like we would have done in the job families. And then once you get a sense of what that looks like and other positions you also want to, since you're designing the comp program, you also want to be thinking about workplace planning, right? What other positions are going to be needed? Who's going to be retiring? What, just being able to think ahead in terms of what you may need to do so you can address it when you're doing this work. Then you do the research. Again, you've got an amazing research and support here, the Nonprofit Center for Northeast Florida in their guide. Indeed, Glassdoor, salary.com, obviously the current positions posted out there. So if you're comparing to market, some of you may not have, I think Lorianne mentioned a specific industry survey. Some of you may not have that specific industry survey. So you may need to look at who your quote unquote competitors are and see what they're paying based on how they're posting their positions. That may be a way. There is not a hard and fast rule in terms of this is how you have to research. There are options that you can do. Again, reviewing your total rewards, and then adjusting the range, which is the whole aging that I mentioned earlier on. What aging means is the Nonprofit Center had a guide that was done in 2017, I believe. And so let's say you were doing this in 2018 or 2019, right? And 2020 hasn't gone out yet. Well, that salary that they did was point in time back in 2016. So what do you need to do to adjust in terms of possible merit increases, of possible wage adjustments that you need to just be thoughtful of when it comes to aging that data? Okay. So how to use the data. This is the hands-on activity I'm going to have you do. If we can have, we're going to do about 20 minutes of this. 20 minutes. We're going to put you in small groups. I am going to drop the job description into the chat. We are going to also give you access to the guide. This is a job description that you may or may not have, or you may or may not need. The purpose of this is to give you a little bit of chance to work on it and kind of see how it looks and feels, and then ultimately have the opportunity to ask questions if you run into any challenges, as well as use the power of collective thought, right? Because this is going to be a collective thought when you go in to do this for your own organization. So you will remember to review the salary that's being used, understand what industry you're in, how does it compare, budget size, things of that nature. And this is how I want you to think of the of this position. And matching it to the guide and figuring out, what you should pay. Two different things. Number one, imagine this as a brand new position. You're posting for this position, brand new position. What would you post this position at? Okay, what would you post this position at? Now imagine the second scenario, and this is where I want you to have some discussion. Imagine this as an incumbent, somebody who's currently working for your organization, and they're saying, I don't think I'm being compensated fairly. And I would like to have someone take a look at that. Okay, so does that make sense so far? So Isis, could you drop the job description in, or do you have access to it?
I absolutely can.
And don't forget about aging the data.
Okay, so it should be in the chat now.
Yep. And will they have access now to the guide or no?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so yet.
Is there a way we can share it with them?
I'll put them into breakout rooms and then I'll share it to the breakout.
Okay.
Might be easier.
Okay. Okay. Before I end, just a thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of, does that make sense? The instructions.
I'm seeing some thumbs up.
Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. Well, if you need us, just holler. I think you can pull up a chat for us and we'll come in and answer the questions.
All right, so everyone should be receiving an invite to join a room now.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, and Annie, do you mind reminding me which exact guide you were asking me to share with folks?
It's the comp guide.
Are you talking about the executive summary or the total report?
Total report.
Okay.
I tried, oh, somebody messaged. I didn't see, sorry.
Hey, Isis, I'm sorry. I had to change. So I missed my invitation.
No worries. I'm
Can you
gonna
send it?
assign you right now.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
We should have everyone that's joining a room, and I'll share that in the chat right now.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I tried printing just the pages in PDF and it wasn't really cooperating with me because there's other things that I needed them to possibly use and look at. So I apologize.
No worries. Okay.
Then I don't know if you want to pause the recording.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, so everyone should be back from the rooms.
I just
Okay,
want to say before we leave, this has been fantastic. I just want to thank you all before it winds up getting cut off and I just don't get a chance to say that, but this has been just so eye-opening and so wonderful. And thank you so much for this presentation this morning.
I know 20 minutes did not give you a lot of time. I know that. So I appreciate that. I know that I had to pack a lot into this short time we have. So real quickly though, just as a debrief, any like ahas, any like, oh my gosh, you know, what did I get myself into? Any or like, wow, okay, this makes sense. Okay, I can see where I'm going with this because I gave you two scenarios because these two scenarios will always come up. Hey, I need a person. Here's a job description. I need you to find somebody for this. How much are we going to pay? The second is, I don't think I'm being paid right. And I'm a development officer. I think I need to be paid more. And that's more like internal looking within your organization to figure out based on the guide that we provided, did they? So just, you know, just your thoughts there. Take yourself off mute, please share, because I'm sure somebody else is going, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. If no, that's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot. Sometimes it's very personal when you're talking about compensation.
I think
No,
Jolie
I-
came with you.
I did, and I'm greetings, good morning, everybody. I'm kind of new to this game. I'm retired military. I started with Hope Haven very recently, and our group, I loved what we came up with. I do see how it can be very difficult if you're already in a company and somebody feels like they should be paid more. I think that's where just from, again, kind of being a newbie to the game, if you will, as an outsider looking in, that's where as a group you need to consider, did you set up benchmarks for people to achieve? Did you give them a clear path to look at to feel like they are working towards something realistic in order to achieve a higher level of compensation? I think that's a communication that needs to go both ways. The member who's already currently there needs to communicate, hey, I want to be able to go and have goals and reach certain milestones. Is that accommodated here? As well as the group doing the hiring or working with the member needs to say, hey, these are the expectations we have, and this is what we look at. Here's kind of a time frame. Sometimes that can be a lot more fluid in places than others, and really have a clear path, because the whole idea is for everybody to be successful. Ultimately, allowing whatever service is being provided to thrive, if you will.
Absolutely. Setting this up it doesn't solve all of your ails and problems, but it definitely helps put this aside to a structured method, right? Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of people coming up and saying, I'm not being compensated enough. I don't think I'm being paid fairly. Without a compensation philosophy in this guideline, you can't know, right? I mentioned the fear of like, now we got to put gender and race in here. Oh my gosh, that's a little fearful. The fear is then the unknown. Once you know what to do to take steps to move it in the right direction. So I, again, so appreciate this. And I'm going to move along because I've got two more things that I want to touch on. I'm not going to go into creating this right now, but I wanted you to see, based on where you're at, that one little exercise can help propel you into creating a range, right? And into creating some ideas of how do we want to start marketing this position, and how do we want to start putting some information behind here. Once you understand the position you're looking for, or the position you have, using the data we have, moving it into this type of grade. And Lori Ann, thank you so much. I'm not getting any, benefits from this, but she's been just amazing. And even sharing her, even though it's a blank slate, even sharing that was so critical. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is just something very simple. Grade 1 could be 2 different type positions. It's okay, but this is just the salary that you're wanting to be able to pay them in, right? And it makes it very simple when you start doing that. This is the tiered in terms of, how do you look at it, like in terms of your people. So when you have people who are now slotted into these areas, right? Now you can say, wow, my maintenance person is really low. We need to green circle them. And my special events coordinator is making really a lot. I'm gonna need to red circle them. Real quickly, what red circle and green circle, red and green means. Red means they're out of the range. They are out of the range. I mentioned it was 20.41 an hour. They are out of the range. Are they out of the range by a lot? No. What does that mean? It means that if they get another increase, they continue to be out of the range. If you choose that path, you're spending money, which is fine, but that is a philosophy that then you have. The one I would be concerned about is the green circle. So this green circle, your minimum is 1148. They're making well below the minimum. This is where that discrimination, that inequity really shows up really, really bad. So when they have a green circle, the idea is to quickly get them to where they need to be, at least if not within the range, and then adjust accordingly. Now, Lori Ann mentioned how they went about doing that. I won't go into any great details about that, but I just wanted to give you that a little bit of insight. When you start seeing the range, and then you start, and this one doesn't have any names or age or gender, or I'm sorry, name or gender or race, but when you start looking at the inequities, you may want to pull that up just to get a gut check of where you're at there. So I just wanted to finish that up. I'm so sorry. So yay, or maybe not yay. Minimum wage is going to increase, right? And it's not just going to increase, but it is a tiered increase. And we're going from $8.65 to $15 in 6 years. This is going to be a kind of crazy, for lack of a better word. So what do we need to do, right? Yes, it's going to have an impact on your staff's pay, but there's also going to be a lot of other things you need to think about. Payroll taxes. Oh my goodness, because those are percentages of what gets paid out. How are you going to try to look at cost cuts? How do you strategically think about this? You're also thinking about compensation philosophy. So now how are you going to cut possibly in order to make it happen, or not cut, right? Lorianne talked a little bit about what they did. Considering fundings, immediate fundings to ease this. I think Lorianne mentioned there was some type of reserve they have that they were looking at possibly using to bridge that. I don't think they ended up using it, but just being thoughtful behind that. And then understanding wage compression, right? I've been there for 10 years. Somebody who just got hired on is now making $15, and I've done this for how long? And now I'm only making 15. So what do I do about that, right? How does that impact, right? So this is what I did, real quick, down and dirty. I had to just pull some numbers, just ignore some of my information. What I want to show you is right here under hourly. I'm gonna see if I can pull my little chart up. Right here under hourly, and then right here under, oh my goodness, that's a horrible circle. Under the new wage. So you've got one increase that's happening, and then you've got another one coming, and then every year after that, you've got a dollar increase, right? So what you need to do, and this is just my initial thought of moving forward quickly, right? Those people who are below need to get above. Period, end of story. You've got to do that. So this is just your wave, but now you'll know what that compression looks like, right? Because the next wave, those people are still low, and you're still going to have to increase them, right? So you've got to have a mindset of what you need to do going in. So this is just a quick down and dirty of how people are going to be impacted and what you need to do. Now, what's going to be very important is, though there is a gap from this 15, okay, so that minimum to this 16, but that's in 5 years. So this customer service lead, number one, they are the next quote unquote tier, but is that going to impact? Because this person is supposed to supervise everybody else, and they may be only making $1 and some change above their person they're supervising. How are you going to address that? And then how are you going to address it all the way down? So those are just things I want you to just be aware of. I don't have a solution for you, but I wanted to put it on your radar. And I thought this was a really good, quick and easy way to look at it holistically when you're looking at it across the full spectrum. Again, attrition aside and everything, these people may leave, and then you're bringing them in at the right wage. But right now, you just need to be aware of how that's going to look. Oh, stop annotating. So, oh, goodness gracious, excuse my mess. So final thoughts, and I just wanted to run through this quickly. We talked a little bit about the FLSA criterias, and that is just to say, make sure you are thoughtful when it comes to those categories. And if you need those revisited, I'm sure the Nonprofit Center has a bunch of resources. The other one is, I hear this a lot because now they're worried. We have this philosophy going out. Can I prevent people from discussing the compensation? Absolutely not. You cannot disallow it. Between the NLRB, which is the National Labor Board, and the executive order that was signed by Obama in April 2014, cannot discourage. They have to be able to speak about it. How do bonuses fit into nonprofits? You've got to be very, very careful. The Sarbanes-Oxley, the consequence of excessive executive compensation and intermediate sanction, which means those who are part of the approving, participating, or benefiting from excessive compensation are penalized with fines. It's significant. And before you go down that path of trying to put bonuses in, just make sure you get somebody to take a look at where you're at and what you're planning on doing. We talked about red circle and green circle. And then my last thing is how often should you be reviewing your wages, or how often should you be reviewing your range? The rule of thumb is every 2 to 3 years. I do understand that the Nonprofit Center puts this out every 3 years, I believe. So it may be right in line. And that is all I have. I'm sorry I rushed through those.
So I know that we're over our time a little bit, so I know folks have to jump off. I just want to give a huge virtual round of applause to Annie and Lorianne, who I don't think is on the call anymore. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and information for us. I think, Annie, you and I could probably stick around for a couple of minutes if folks have any questions, but if not, please make sure you take the survey that Jamie, my colleague, just put into the chat before you log off. But if not, thank you so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your weekend and your weekend. Have a great day. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to just come off mute, put it in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer them.